we good, Deb?
It's saying less than a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, good evening. It is 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. And I would like to call to order this regular meeting of the Sturgis Common Council. Our first item is approval of the agenda. And there is just one item that I would like to call to attention if anyone so chooses to make the adjustment. We have item 9.1, which is an item that was tabled from the last meeting. On Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. And I would like to call to order this regular meeting of the Sturgis Common Council.
Okay.
Our first item is approval of the agenda. And
Sorry, that's just distracting.
Sorry, I was trying to do both, so, all right.
That's okay. All right, so item 9.1 was tabled from the previous meeting, and so it's under tabled items right now, since it has to be, but that item actually goes with items 12.2 and 12.3. So if council would like a smoother discussion regarding those items that all go together, I might suggest moving item 9.1 to maybe between 12.3 and 12.4, something like that.
Mayor, I'd make a motion on the agenda. There's another additional item. I think Councillor Blakeman received the same text from Chris Bergman about his voluntary annexation. Evidently, he'd sent an email requesting that be tabled until the second meeting in November. So, along with the, we had a tabled item from the 22nd of July, the Colliers contract that was tabled by motion by Councillor Dargits at July 22nd to this meeting. So I would motion that we approve this agenda. Move tabled item 9.1 to position under 12.3. Remove 11.2 and add the Collier's report to 14.2.
Okay, so you want to move the Colliers to after exec?
Well, there's a contract there that we would need to discuss before we have any action. So it seems like that's a reasonable move. I guess that's my motion.
Well, there is a motion on the floor. Okay, that was a first by Kevin and a second by Jim to move item 9.1 to after item 12.3, to remove item 11.2 and to add an item 14.2 on a Collier's contract.
What was the last number?
14.2.
Add a 14.2. Okay. There's no further discussion. First and second on the floor. All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no. Okay, we have an agenda.
And if we could all please stand and remove cover for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, up next, we have announcements and praise. I would like to take a moment to praise our Heavenly Father. Those who care to join in, please do so. Father in heaven, your eyes are upon those who fear you. We ask that you grant your servants to rejoice in unfailing health of mind and body, and to bestow on your people the gifts of unity and peace in you. Help us all strive to achieve the high call of pursuing justice and speaking out against evil, no matter what it costs us. Speak to us, Lord. Your servants are listening and are here to do your will. In your holy name we trust, and in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit. As far as announcements, have a couple. First, in observance of Patriot Day on September 11th, residents are encouraged to display flags in and outside their homes. And so that is in honor and memory of those victims from the September 11th attacks. And city offices will be open as usual. Another announcement that I have is regarding the budget and the budget presentation. So I want to propose a timeline for the budget. So I would suggest that a special meeting be held either on September 23rd or September 30th. There are just a few more things that we're trying to button up with the budget. Some conversations need to be had with department heads to finalize everything and give them a final chance to go through everything that they have and make any adjustments. So at that special meeting that I would propose, I would say it be like a work session where the budget is presented and council can have discussion, and then allow council 4 weeks to have the budget in hand to look through everything, and then have a first reading on October 21st, and then a second reading on November 4th. And that would put the budget in effect before the end of November. So that is just what I'm proposing. I don't know if there's anyone has any suggestions or preference on the date of a special meeting, but that can certainly be discussed when we get closer to it. So that is all I have for announcements. Does anyone else have any announcements or praise? Okay, anyone from the public with any announcements or praise? All right. That brings us down to the non-agenda matters. And in this section, the public is invited to come forward regarding any non-agenda matters and address the council. If you have anything, please come forward to the microphone, state your name and whether or not you are a resident of Sturgis. Please keep your comments respectful and to 3 minutes or less. Is there anyone with non-agenda? Come on up, Mr. Richards.
I'm David Richards. I've been working for trying to go back to see if we can start up a small small lake for the little kids to play in. We sold the land quite a few years ago to the city with the idea that we'd put in a pond for the kids to play in, and that blew up. So now I put together, and I'll pass out it, a cost estimate. We have money on hand to carry that. I think that's, see if we got one here. So I hope that's enough. Okay. I've got estimates on everything that would be needed for us for about an acre pond. You can call it a lake. And this may be a little hard to read, but some of them are bids and the others are quotes as close as we could get. So we've got that much money. This totals out about $365,000. And we've got that much in checks and money and in that would be in Black Hills Area Foundation. So there's money on hand. This is something that the city wouldn't have to pay anything on. And at the bottom of my estimates there, I also wondered about 2 lifeguards you'll see in there, which would add to the cost. But if we could do that, then the city would be pretty much free of any kind of cost to it. And then this is something I'm putting out so that you can look at it. I don't mean you have to do it, but I've been president of different organizations. I always did this, put out an estimate and tell people what to do, and I told them to go home and fight with their wives and anything else, find out what everybody thought, and then come back with a better plan, or either on what I had or a different one. So this is what I'm doing here. This is just a idea for you to see what you can do. And I've also got some documents to show where that money is. If you want those documents, I could leave them with you. So then you can think about this and maybe talk about it at our next meeting. Now, is there any questions?
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Richards? Well, thank you for this information. I know we've had a number of conversations over the last year about what we could possibly do here, or what you could do. So thank you for this information again.
I'll bring this over and give it to you, and this tells you where the money is. I want to compliment you because it looks like you've got a pretty good system set up after having to change your governments here. So I think you've done an excellent job.
Thank you.
Take it up. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Same thing? Okay. Just to look at. Do you want to pass it around? Okay. Is there anyone else? Any non-agenda matters? Okay.
Mayor, I've got a few that
Okay.
I'd like to kind of start off a small discussion about our streaming to YouTube and how we ended up. That's generated a couple of calls to me, and I'd like to clarify that the council didn't make that decision, but personally I support some of that. There was some struggles that one of our other government organizations in our community had with Facebook. Meade County has started streaming to YouTube, actually I think about 60 days ago, maybe not quite. And their situation was different things were being picked up that could be construed as part of song lyrics and maybe prevented content and those sorts of things. And well, it seems like it might be a trivial piece. The move to YouTube is so that we don't end up with blank pieces. I mean, there can be times when that happens where the monitoring just cuts the sound off of our videos. I don't know as if the city had that, but I know that that was happening in other places. And all of a sudden it becomes a problem that we're trying to censor maybe because of a blank piece. And that, I mean, I'm taking some of the county's discussion here and rolling it into our own piece, but I think it's good that we share the true reasons for some of this is. I don't know if this factors in exactly where we were at with our discussion here, but it does seem in line with what other organizations are doing to keep their streaming services front and center. You know, the downfall to YouTube is we can get some ads sometimes, so it can be a little bit of a hassle. Additionally, I'd like to point out that the finance officer is has statutational duties. I murdered that word. Statutory duties. Yeah, there we go. And I think we do need to appoint a finance officer because there's pieces that has to make this happen. So we have to talk about an interim finance officer now that we don't have one. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't point out that our new ordinance is in place that requires us to have monthly reporting, but we have no monthly reporting. And so as we brought up coming into the budget in only a couple short weeks, part of what leads us into looking at a budget is knowing what our expenditures and what our revenue collection has been year to date. So that reporting is of utmost importance. And tied to that discussion on the budget, we have to have our mill levy to the county auditor by the 1st of October. So we can't necessarily just have a work session at the end of the month. We have to provide that mill levy to the auditor on that timeline. Mayor, I'm going to go over the 3 minutes here, and I hope you afford me the time to bring this up because I've got two hard questions that go. One is a question of you, and that has, by direction, any of our department heads been told to not communicate with the council?
No.
Okay, so there's completely open communication that we can have on issues with the city, projects that are coming, and we can have the department heads be proactive with that?
Absolutely. Department heads are just told to follow their chain of command when taking any orders or direction because they all have duties that they need to work on. And so in taking on any new duties, they've all been told to check with their supervisor before taking on any new duties. But anyone can talk to anyone.
Okay, good. That's good to have that clarified, that communications on DOT projects, TIFs, those sorts of things can be proactively shared with council from our department heads. The final deal is, and it's been a thing that I'm not exactly sure how it got to where it is, but there's been some discussion about outsourcing to a new nonprofit components of the rally. And to the point where one staff member made a comment about a potential forthcoming proposal, which I know I'm not aware of. I don't know if anyone else on the council is aware of. But if there was some direction, and it would be, you know, from part of your team, you directing that, who has brought that forward, and why are we talking about that if we are?
The only times that I have ever heard about that were the times at one of our meetings, our committee meetings, when it was brought up, and another time when it was brought up to the full council, I believe. So only twice have I heard about it.
Okay, well, I hope that that's where we're going. I mean, we've revisited that ground a few times, and it's definitely been a struggle in our community, and at a time where we're working so hard on budget and all those things, we definitely don't need the noise of
Well,
talking about another level or even taking a proposal. I mean, if that was something we were considering, we would be issuing an RFP and putting it out there for anyone to take a crack at
I
it.
don't know who told you about a proposal, but I've never even heard about a proposal. And the last I heard of this was at a committee meeting when it was shut down, and that committee was asked if they wanted it brought to the full council again. And that committee said no. And that was the last I heard of it.
Good
So
clarification.
I'm not sure. I'm sorry? Legal and finance.
Thank you.
So, sure thing.
I have one comment as well. So on the 28th, I reached out about this because, as we know, Ordinance 2024-06, which is adopting Title VII, went into effect on August 30th. And that ordinance establishes the Rally and Events Subcommittee. And so I was curious when we would be seeing the appointments for that.
I pushed it back to next meeting. I mean, if at exec or at a break, I mean, if council so chooses that they have to have that tonight, I can certainly try to come up with something, but I've needed a little more time to look at what everyone was appointed to, and there are some boards that Lisa is on too, so I've had to figure out who's going to be on those, and so I was waiting to do them all at once. So on the 16th, it was already moved to that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
The 16th? Any other non-agenda matters? Okay, then that brings us down to the mayor's report. All we have here is a couple of payroll items. Payroll changes. Does anyone have any questions on those? I'm sure Lisa could answer any questions. We have a referee and then a paramedic. All right. No one has any questions? That'll bring us down to the consent agenda. And here we have some minutes, a couple of final plats, and a couple of public hearings to be set. Is there anything on the consent agenda that anyone on council would like to see removed for discussion? Is there anything on the consent agenda that anyone from the public would like to see removed for discussion? Yes, Bonnie.
Use the microphone, please. Hold it close.
I just had a question about 7-3, no, not 7-3, 7-2 at 1238 Lizelle. I wasn't quite figuring out who that was or what
Okay,
that was.
so we will pull 7.2. Okay, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll motion to approve with pulling 7.2 for discussion.
Okay, that is a first by Ruth
I'll second.
and a second by Mike to approve the consent agenda, pulling item 7.2. All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Those opposed with a no. Okay, that consent agenda is approved. That brings us to 7.2, which is a final plat for the 1238 Lizelle Street. And we don't have Dave here or anyone from, oh, Rick, do you have some info on that one? Bonnie, you said you just want to know where it is?
I couldn't really tell who and what.
Mayor, this is a plat that's been submitted by NG Main Street LLC, who are the owners of lots 13 through 16 of Block 1 of the original town of Sturgis. They're simply platting those 3 lots into one big lot. So they're just combining 3 of the smaller old town lots that are 25 feet wide into one larger lot. And this is located on the corner of 3rd Street and Lizelle.
And they're just empty lots right now.
Sorry, 4 lots. It's 4 25-foot lots. Correct.
Those are the ones that are just vacant lots, and they're looking to maybe build a
Correct.
building. Okay.
Third and Lozelle, that's across the street east from the backside of Rocking Tree?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick. Any other questions on that item 7.2?
I'd move to approve 7-2.
Okay, that's a first by Kevin to approve that final plat.
Second.
Second by Dawn.
Just,
And-
if I may interrupt. David, Eleanor, I'd like to thank you both for coming. Thank you very much for your time and patience. We'll get there. I'm sorry, Mayor.
That's okay. So we have a first and a second to approve the final plat for the 1238 Lizelle Street. Is there any further discussion from the public? All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no. Okay, that is approved. That brings us down to the claims, item 8.1. Are there any questions on the claims?
Mayor, I have one question.
Sure.
We have a charge at a local hotel on there for our contest winner. We had a charge on the last claims back in August for another local hotel for contest winner. The only contest I remember having last year was our 84th logo contest. Can you answer why we have 2 hotel stays at different hotels?
And what page are you on, could I ask?
On this one, it's under rally and events.
Do you know the page number, Kevin?
Let me dig it up. Pardon me.
It doesn't list what hotel, does it?
Super 8 for this month's and Baymount for the last time.
Yes, I booked the one for the 84th logo winner, and that was at Super 8.
Okay.
So I can confirm that.
What was the contest winner?
They were supposed to stay originally at Baymont, but then Baymont did not have any rooms available, if I remember correctly. Did we actually?
But Tammy did have another winner of something, and I'm sorry, I don't know what that one was for. Because I know they had one, and then I had the 84th logo winner. And she stayed at the Super 8.
Okay. Guess the only one that I knew of, Kevin as well, was that 84th logo winner. Tammy is not here this evening. If that question, the Baymont one was on the last claims though, so that were already approved.
Baymount was on the 819.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
text Robin, because I worked with her on getting the room, so.
Sure. Well, I know that this one, like Deb said, this one, that contest winner did stay at the Super 8, so this would have been for the 84th logo winner.
Yeah, and was that directed to mayor and council? Do you know what? Or was it sponsorship?
He said it was under rallying events.
The Baymount is under rally and events. It says just a contest winner for description.
Super
Where's
8's
the
under
Super 8?
sponsorship.
Sponsorship?
Page 6.
Okay.
So this would at least be correct for that contest winner.
I don't see any reason why we can't continue with the claims. I mean, the question is last month's claims now, so.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions? Sure, Bonnie.
I can't find it now, but I remember seeing something in here that I saw 2 awards were documented, but I can't find it right now where it was, but when I was going through this,
These current claims or the previous claims?
no, this tonight's agenda, when I was going through tonight's agenda, I thought I ran onto something that were 2 awards. So that may explain that other one, but I can't find it right now.
Page 7. Rally awards and rally awards engraving.
That's probably like the beard and
Yeah.
and tattoo contest, maybe.
Any other questions? All right, well, is there a motion on the claims?
Okay, I do have an answer from Robin. The Baymont one was for the Passport to Sturgis winner from 2023. Like they would go to different businesses and get their passport stamped, and then you got your name in for a grand prize, and that's who was the winner.
And they won a hotel stay for the
Yeah.
2024.
Right.
Gotcha. Does that answer that, Kevin? Okay. So for these claims, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion. Approve.
That's a first by Jesse to approve the claims,
I'll second it.
and a second by Tony. Any further discussion from the public? Okay, we'll go ahead and roll call. Nick?
Yes.
Jim? Don?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Okay, and claims are approved. That'll bring us down to item 10, which is the Board of Adjustments. So we will break from our regular meeting to convene as the Board of Adjustments. And so I would ask, does anyone on council have any conflicts of interest to declare or any ex parte communications to declare?
Mayor, I sit on the SADC board. I don't know that that would necessarily.
I mean, did you have a lot of discussion on this item
No.
when in those meetings? Then I would say no. Although I'm not an attorney, so it's up to you if you want to.
I'll abstain from that just to be safe.
Okay. All right. Okay, and we got Rick will do this, and Rick, I will swear you in, I guess. Raise your right hand, and do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. For consideration tonight is a variance request for gravel surfacing at 1155 Industry Road. C4 Fabrications has requested a variance to Title 18.05.13 that states all of the lot used for parking of vehicles, for the storage and display of merchandise, and all driveways used for ingress and egress shall be constructed of concrete or asphalt and maintained in a good condition. Off-street parking is regulated by Article 5. All areas utilized for vehicle traffic or parking shall be of hard surface material. This lot was discovered by staff on July 9th. Conversations were had with the manager, Mr. Caleb Rupp, that in order to continue the use, a variance must be approved. The applicant did wish to have a gravel surface parking lot located at this address for additional parking only. The variance request provides the minimum adjustment necessary for reasonable use of the land. The property is zoned general industry. Signage was placed on the property July 12th of 2024. 8 landowner response forms were sent out. 3 were returned with approval. The others not returned, which indicates a sign of approval if they are not returned. Planning Commission did hear this item and made motion for approval of it at the August 13th meeting and is recommending approval to the council. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Rick. Does anyone have any questions for Rick? The variance.
Just one. Have we heard from any other business owners in that area?
Not that I'm aware of. I see Paul is here. Nope, nothing.
And SEDC's fine with this?
Yeah, correct. This would be pretty conducive of some of the other properties out there that have gravel surfaces for storage of whatever, you know. The High Qual used to have one. The electrical place just got one a couple of months ago that used to be the Corbon lot to store power poles and things of that nature.
So again, this recommendation was for approval. It passed through planning and zoning. Any other questions from council or the board? Right, is there a motion?
I'd move to approve.
That's a first by Nick to approve that variance,
Second.
and a second by Dawn. Any further discussion? Right, all those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no. All right, that variance passes. And up next,
We have another gravel surfacing request at 3625 Hanson Avenue. This is the lot that is owned by the Sturgis Economical Development Corporation. They have also requested a variance to Title 18.05.13 that states all of the lot used for parking of vehicles, the storage and display of merchandise, and all driveways used for vehicle ingress and egress shall be constructed of concrete or asphalt and maintained in a good condition. Off-street parking is regulated in Article 5. All areas utilized for vehicle travel or parking shall be hard surfaced material. The applicant wishes to have a gravel surfacing parking lot at this location to allow for more options for the possible future renters in the neighboring fourplex. The variance request provides the minimum adjustment necessary for the reasonable use of this land. The property is zoned general and industry. Signage was placed on the property July 1st of 2024. 5 landowner response forms went out, 2 were returned with approval. Planning Commission did hear this and recommended approval August 13th, 2024 at their meeting and recommends approval. This is actually just a kind of the area that has been set aside for a future road and would allow for some additional trailer storage for the incubator or the building, the fourplex that's been built to house different tenants. Some of them needed additional parking space to park trailers, like for an electrician or a plumber or whoever, and they didn't have it in their parking lot, so this would allow for that. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
thank you, Rick. Any questions for Rick on this one? Another variance to the gravel surfacing. If there are no questions, is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
That's a first by Jim
Second.
and a second by Dawn to approve that variance for gravel surfacing. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Those opposed with a no. And that passes. Thank you, Rick. And so we will adjourn the Board of Adjustments and reconvene with our regular meeting. So then up next, item 11.1. Actually, on the agenda, it says consideration for zoning change at 1901 West Jody. It would actually be a first reading for a zoning change. So the zoning change requires 2 readings. So this is actually first reading for a zoning change. And Rick, were you gonna speak to this? Okay, thank you.
So up for consideration today is a zoning change for 1901 West Jody from medium density residential to mobile home 1. This is the plat that was just approved earlier. Roy Jones is the owner of this property containing 2 mobile homes located at 1901 Jody Street. The property is described as Tract M of McKee Edition. The property is currently zoned medium density residential housing. The applicant is requesting a zoning change from medium density residential to mobile home 1 to meet the requirements to allow the 2 mobile homes to remain. If you remember, it's been several months ago, this came before the council, and council gave direction that we needed to plat this property in order to have the 2 mobile homes. Mr. Jones has complied with that. He has gotten all of the city utilities squared away as far as having their own individual service lines. So that has been all taken care of. Some of the code references here are Title 18, Article 6, Title 18, Article 7, Title 18, 0504, and Title 18, 0507. What else can I tell you? The Board of Adjustments was presented a variance to allow these homes to stay on July 17th of 2023. The Board of Adjustment at that time did deny the request with the recommendation to plat the parcel into separate lots and a change in zoning. Mr. Jones has separated the utilities, submitted both plat and zoning change application. Mr. Jones is required to provide hard surfacing to these lots within a 3-year period. 21 landowner response forms went out, 4 returned with approval, and 3 with denials. The concerns included the lack of maintenance on the property, decreasing neighboring property value. Planning Commission did meet and hear on this on August 13th, 2024, and did make a motion to recommend approval of the zoning change.
Thank you, Rick. Does anybody have any questions on this one? Again, as Rick mentioned, this did come before council a while ago, and Mr. Jones was asked to make these changes, and so he did what he was asked to do. Questions? Do you have a question, Jim?
Yeah, I have a question. Rick, when you send out the letters asking for a response from neighbors, how does that work? Do they all come together to the committee to decide at that point, or is it a vote? If it's 6-3 against, is that taken into consideration?
Yes, it is when they're heard. So they're sent out by certified letter to all the adjoining landowners within, forgive me, I believe it's 150 feet surrounding the property. So that dictates how many letters go out. If you're within that distance, you get a letter. And in the letter, it's stated that you can either approve or disapprove. And if you don't return the letter, it's taken to mean that you're giving approval. So when we get those back or we don't get those back, those are counted as approval. The only ones that are counted as being denied are the ones that are typically sent back and checked denied, and then it's a certain percentage that has to be reached in order for the Planning Commission to make that recommendation.
So in this case, where there were 3 that asked for denial, are they then brought, do they get the notice that?
They will not get a notice. They're noticed in that original letter on what date and time it will be held or heard at the Planning Commission.
They could come to the meeting themselves?
Correct.
But in this case, where they were thinking that there was not a good care of the property, apparently, again, they'd have to come to the meeting to disagree.
Right.
Okay.
And I think what originally happened, if my memory serves, they, a mobile home was brought in, it was never really completely set up, and so it, this whole thing started, and it's been, what did I say, 23, so almost a year now, where the manufactured home hasn't been set up correctly, because we're taking care of all these conditions, so that could be a part of that as well. Mr. Jones is here as well, if anybody has any questions for him.
Any other questions? There's no questions. Is there a motion?
I'd make that motion to approve.
Okay, that is a first by Jim to approve the first reading of a zoning change at 1901 West Jody.
I'll second.
And that's a second by Mike. Any further discussion from the public? Okay, I'll go ahead and roll call this just since it's a zoning change. Tony?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Nick?
Abstain.
Okay, so we
Thank
have,
you.
thanks, Rick, 7 yeses and 1 abstention. So that passes. Which brings us down to item 12.1. And this was a request from Tom's Teas to be on the agenda. Not sure if I see San here. And there was a request to allocate the royalty payment for use at the Sturgis Community Center. Has anyone seen? San is not here, correct? Well, he was requesting action on this when asking to be put on the agenda. He's not here to answer any questions, but does anyone have any questions?
I think he was here, what, a month or so ago and spoke regarding this.
He made a comment at the non-agenda matters, yep.
Do we have a balance sheet on, is there $3,500?
I don't know that, it would be for his year, so the royalty payments wouldn't be due until January, I believe, of 2025, because we would need to know what that would even be, so we don't know what he would owe in royalty payments. Also, I don't know that we've ever had in anyone's contract that their royalty money would go to anything specific. And I will say, just from what I have heard, he was looking to have that money go towards a water fountain at the community center. But we did have a resident who offered to donate one for free to the community center. So there was no need for that. I don't know if he wanted this money to go to something else, but I know he was requesting it to go to a water fountain, and we had someone else offer to donate a water fountain for free. So.
May I just, I don't know if this has been done in the past. I'm not sure if that's a good precedent. If you to stretch it out, if you have 100 people that make designations like that, that's a bookkeeping nightmare. But it also isn't the reason. Of course, he's just donating the money that he has earned. Is that correct?
Well, it's a royalty payment because he's a licensee, so
it's money
he's
that he-
licensed to use our intellectual property, and so he has to pay a royalty.
Money that we would have written a check to him.
No.
No, he
Other
writes a
way.
check to us
Right.
for using
Then,
our,
okay,
yeah,
then
our
I still
property.
think it's a bad precedent is all. I think that we need to have, probably, I have never really discussed that in terms of putting it into ordinance, but again, if you just,
Sorry, Jim.
go ahead.
I was just wondering, is it possible to table this and give him an opportunity I understand he had the opportunity to come tonight, but can we table it and give him the opportunity to come speak if he would like to at the next meeting?
Council can make that motion if they so choose.
I'll make the motion to table it to the next meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, that's a first by Jesse to table and a second by Ruth. So there will be no further discussion when an item is tabled. So all those in favor of tabling this to the next meeting, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no.
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 Okay, so that was 6 yeses and 2 nos. So that will be tabled to the next meeting. All right.
Bonnie.
Yes, Bonnie.
This would be an opportunity to explain that royalty relationship. I don't know anything about that, and I'm sure most of the public doesn't either, what funds he's referring to, how those funds become accumulated or billed to him. So if you would explain that royalty relationship, that would be helpful.
Okay, I can't speak any specifics since this item was tabled and there's no further discussion on any tabled items. But just so people know, we have licensees that they're licensed to use our intellectual property. And so when they sell any items with using our property, then they pay the city back a royalty on whatever they sell using the city's intellectual property. And so they report back to us what they made in sales, and then they send the city a check for whatever percentage is in their contract for their royalty. So if it's 10% or something
Is
like that.
everyone's royalty the same, or is it vary
The-
per merchant?
I can't answer that question. I'd have to look at every contract. There is generally a standard royalty. So
Would you do that and next meeting give us a clear understanding of that licensee and royalty?
what else would you be looking for? I mean, I can't go through everyone's contracts, their contracts.
I
So
don't think you have to do that. I think somebody probably knows, just not you. And so a few questions asked Heather and Jan, I think would reveal that. Is there a range?
Right.
Does the royalty percent run from 2 to 10%?
Well, that's
or
getting
do
into-
certain items have certain royalties on them and other items have other royalties? That's what I'm asking for, is an understanding of the royalty relationship.
Sure. I mean, I can't get into any specifics about contracts, Bonnie, so I can't tell you. That would be contract negotiations, so.
I'm not asking for specifics about contracts. I'm asking about standard practice, understanding how that standard practice
Well,
works. And so, and I don't expect you, Angela, to know the answer to every question. You have a whole city of employees that somebody knows how that's figured out.
I can tell you that there is a standard, yes, but I cannot tell you that in every single case, everyone's is the same, but there is a standard, yes.
Okay, and that's what I'm asking for. What is the range of royalty percent? That's what I'm asking for, is to understand that royalty program with the licensees.
I believe it's either around 8 or 10%.
I don't want guesses, I don't want I thinks. I'd like you to get the answer to the question.
And that will bring us down to item 12.2, which is consideration to approve submitted TIF number 29 contract agreement and the bank assignment agreement. This is with the Harvest Meadows and Valley View subdivision. And if everyone on council has had time to review all that, does anyone have any questions on that specific item 12.2, which is the contract agreement? I know there were some, gosh, and now I don't know if it was just in this 12.2 in the contract agreement. There were a few things that were different than the last agreement. So this TIF 29 was formerly TIF 22, and everything is pretty much the same. A few changes were made. It was cleaner just to reassign the TIF and give it a new number. Did anyone on council have any specific questions?
Rick, can you talk to this?
I know, if the developers could, plan
Yeah,
on.
if you have any specifics, I can try and answer them, or the developers are here. They're probably much more able to answer any specific questions. Basically, this stems around TIF 22 and a rewrite of the boundaries and then the associated agreements that go with this. This was done as a agreeable action with the council and the developers who had met a couple of months ago. This was brought forward based on some of the timing of the TIF. 22 wasn't able to be met. Some of that in part due to some other projects that the city were doing to bring infrastructure out there. And some of this had been delayed. We were delayed on trying to negotiate a route for those utilities back with some of the other private landowners, and then we kind of switched gears and went with Plan B and ran it in the road right away. We had some other things such as the dedication of Silver Street and the dedication of what's the one, 17th Street. We had to dedicate that. So all of that's taken quite a bit of time to get done, and we're finally to a point to start moving forward with the project, but we were delayed, and so we weren't hitting those key components that were agreed to and signed in TIF 22. One of the other major changes to the TIF was some of the internal financing that was offered by the city to the developers. That has been removed, and now the entire TIF 29 is going to be externally sourced through their private banking. That hits kind of the highlights. If you have any more questions or any specific questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
I think we need to explain what the difference is between item 12.2 and 12.3.
So the 12.2 being that contract agreement, and Rick, I don't know if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this too would be any money in the contract agreement. And in this TIF 29, the biggest difference from TIF 22 is the city will not be funding this. The developer will be receiving their own funding for this.
That's correct. Kyle Trelor with Pivot Development Group. Rick did a very good recap of kind of how we got to this point. The three items that are in front of you are all related, so you could quite simply take a vote on all three of them because they're the three steps to doing this project. Basically what we're doing with the last one is vacating TIF 22 and replacing it with a new TIF district, which is the exact same boundary as we had before. We're updating the project plan for what Rick had kind of described, and we're ready to get started.
It appears that 29, just reading through some of the numbers, is costing significantly more than 22.
No, that's it. So when we met with council and we talked about this, part of the confusion with the 22 and what we wanted to do is clean this up was put those real costs of what that's going to be. There's some interest costs in there. What we did is with this one, with 29, where this was not set with 22, we set the maximums where 22 left it open-ended. So it was whatever the rate was going to be could be collected. Now we've set a hard top-line goal of what that interest dollar is going to be, and we knew that was going to be a higher number than what was in there. The original TIF was written with like a 5% interest rate, and that just doesn't exist anymore. So with the project going fully onto our balance sheets and with no money coming from the city funds anymore, we went and updated the interest rate, so you can see that very clearly in there. The project costs and the project plan are essentially unchanged. There is the addition of, we met with city staff, and I think Public Works Committee had met too, and we added the construction of another road and the asphalt topping of Alder Place into this project plan. So there's a little bit of money in there for that. But at the end of the day, we as developers are going to be fully responsible for ensuring that this works, and the city doesn't have any liability anymore. So by replacing 22 with 29, it's cleaning up that language and removing the city's $1 million obligation.
Was that $1 million was a loan, correct? In
Correct.
22?
Yep.
And the additional, whatever it is, 900,000, or I don't know the exact number, that's because of that additional road?
Yes, it's called Orchard Lane, and obviously this project's been going on for 3 years now, and we're excited to get it started. But that's for Orchard Lane, which is I don't know if we can pull up an exhibit, but it was not included in the original project plan, and it's going to cost a little more than $1 million, and then we have about $300,000 to $400,000 in paving Alder. So we're not asking for the full amount, but we did ask for a little bit more to make that happen.
You took some parks and stuff out of that, correct? Out of this one that you had in the last one?
We did. That language was quite simply leftover language from a different TIF that was written at that same time. If you go back to when that first TIF was approved, we have a space dedicated and set aside for a park in a future phase, and that's always been the goal of where that park is going to be, and that's what the discussion was with that 22 TIF. We do have included in this one, we've got a significant amount of bike path that we're providing. We've got some signalized street crossings that we're creating the infrastructure to tie this entire area together. So it includes those pieces to make this whole thing work.
I've had several people that have called me and some that talked to me personally, and if we don't vote for this positively, does 22 still exist?
Yes.
So the project is going to move forward one way or the other.
Potentially, yes.
As you may understand, the difficulty for the citizenry, having had much information about the Sturgis government having difficulty financially, and TIFs are one of the reasons. Many people feel that's true. So it's difficult for an average citizen to say, you're going to do another TIF? We already have, what was the number? But considerably more than any other city our size. It seems difficult to wonder why we continue to give TIFs. I understand what should be the reason, but we've got no money coming back for a long time, and this may be no money from us, but it also doesn't provide any income for the city.
So so number one, there are a lot of conversations and hardships that were resultant from, quite honestly, the city borrowing money for TIFs. The whole reason why we have brought this forward was simply to remove that city obligation from this and put it all onto us as a private developer. So that is the main reason why this is here. We did run some numbers, and I know, Bill, you probably have them, but this is, an economic boom for the city of Sturgis. There's building permit fees, there's tapping fees. We have a lot of different things, and I think we roughly added up just in building permit fees, taking a low number, we were somewhere close to,
Council, Mayor, Bill Phillips with partner with Shannon and Kyle. Yeah, just in talking about, revenue streams that will be coming to the city during the phases of it. I just threw off the city sites, the fees, and kind of put some numbers to what this project looks like. And roughly in utilities, you know, once this is built out, we'll be looking at 18 to 20,000 a month. That's just going for water, sewer, and garbage. That's over 200,000 a year. And over the course of 15 years, say we're built out at year 5, you know, that's 3 million plus. So there's that key. Just in building permits, and again, taking it off the city site and applying it to what we're planning out there. The TIF's getting 25,000. I think the county will have some reimbursement also for their administrative fees for administering the TIF. Just our townhomes and single family in building permits, tap fees, and that's about 215,000. And then our multifamily units, just using that same formulas that are on the city site, that's an additional 80,000 just in permits. So we're talking $270,000 to $300,000 going to the city just for permitting, fees, that kind of stuff. That doesn't take into account contractor licenses, the economic factors, the jobs, the city
That's when
spending.
you're built out, these numbers are, that you're talking, Bill.
That's
when you're
just
built
taking
out
what the cost for the permits are.
for all the units. So over the
For
course
this
of
phase.
20, once you're built out, that's
Yes,
the total number.
yes.
Kind of to that point too, with the project plan and you know, especially even now with this revised TIF 29, the onus is on us as developers to make sure that we're hitting the development rates that we have set in here. So when we say these numbers specifically, we have to hit those numbers for this to pay back on the rate that it shows, right? So it will be us pushing that, and just like I think we've got a couple other projects, we have met and exceeded all of our building permit requirements on every other project that we've done. And this full onus will be on us, and it's not just us, but obviously with the private financing aspect in place on this, which is what the assignment's for. We've got the loans, you know, ready to be signed, but our financial institutions have vetted the project, and they are also making sure that this project makes sense and that we hit these timeframes. So there's a lot of different safeguards on our side of the table, and no liability on the city side of the table, except for that, you know, the benefit of the removing of that $1 million from 22.
Thank you. One other question that came up was the size of the streets, and will it be ample for parking and travel and all of that?
That's a great question. Back when we did 22, we had quite the discussion on street widths, and we had a PUD in place where we had asked from some reductions from the current ordinance, but through the discussion, and I know some of you, and maybe Rick can speak to this as well, there was a width that we agreed to that allowed for parking, and that was good for city staff, and Rick, I'll let you kind of fill in, but we came to a number that was agreed to.
So there is an existing PUD that the city council did approve. We did reach out to the South Dakota Legal, what's that called? Government Affairs Office, and brought up the question of whether or not, once a planned unit development is authorized by the council, if it can be amended or changed, and the short answer was no, not without having some specific ordinances in place, which we don't have. So that PUD, when it was approved for that property and changed the classification, so when you do a planned unit development, kind of all of your zoning requirements go out the window, and the developer is able to present a package to the council, and then the council votes to take action on that. Some of the things that were talked about were street widths, based on the classification of the street. There's different widths based on what the classification is. I believe in that PUD, it went into lot frontage size, the minimum square footage. I believe there was a piece in there that also did require for off-street parking. The streets are going to be designated as snow routes. All these particular pieces are outlined in the PUD, and that PUD is still valid and in place regardless of the TIF number that's associated, because that PUD is attached to the legal description of the property, which in TIF 22 and 29 are the same.
And I might add to that, just as some more background color. TIF 22 and the PUD and the project plan and the many actions that happened back in 2022. I think we had a lot of different things, from annexation to the PUD, the creation of the original TIF, a project plan was approved. The overall goal of this project, just to kind of take it back to where we started, was we wanted to work together with the city to both upgrade Avalanche Road and create 2 new subdivisions, which were Harvest Hills and Valley View, that have names now. And one side, we've got what we would consider more of an affordable home product, which is what the true reason for the PUD was, in making sure that we could fit a certain price point house on a certain lot size. And so we had the PUD set aside so that we could plat out these affordable homes. The TIF was involved in making sure that we could reach those price points. On the other side, we have Harvest Hills and then Valley View. On the other one, we have more of the market rate homes. We have some townhomes because we wanted to offer some townhome product, and then we have some apartment lots in there. The goal was to offer new and price point targeted housing to the city of Sturgis, which we were able to do through the creation of all of these different pieces. That's the reason why the initial $1 million was added in from the city on 22, was to be a partner in that development. Obviously, things were different. We had a 5% interest rate back in those days. We're not anywhere near that anymore. But the reality is it's still a good project, and we want to take it forward, and we want to hold those, because we believe that the city still needs affordable housing, that it needs high-quality apartment living, that it needs townhomes and more single family. And so we're excited to bring that forward, but it's no secret that money's not easy to come by right now, and this allows us to take the whole project and move forward with it without the questions of where does that $1 million come from. It allows us to recover the cost per the original TIF agreement, and still build the subdivision and project that we wanted, or that we proposed years and years ago.
So, Rick, you've heard him say, so the $1 million that the city would be obligated on TIF 22 would be removed on 29.
Correct, it's been removed. There was an obligation of 40% from the water fund and 60% from the general fund, I believe, and that language, and what was the original reason why we had asked them, the city staff had went to them and council and had sat down and said, hey, we'd like to rewrite this TIF 22, and again, we don't feel that we can meet those obligations. Some of the timing factors have changed. It would be in everybody's best interest to take a look at rewriting it.
And they're going to take care of Avalanche Road besides?
We're going to take care of a portion of Avalanche. It's going to be a phase. Full transparency. I mean, Avalanche Road is not going to be paved and curb and guttered all the way up to the rubble site. But as these phases happen, that road will be significantly improved, and we'll go to a 3-lane with a dedicated turn signal. They'll have on this particular phase, there's a bike path on the north side of Avalanche. There'll be curb and gutter, there's storm drainage, all the things that we want to make sure are in a subdivision, and some of the things, when Kyle talks about sitting down with city staff, we try to learn something from some of our previous subdivisions or failures, so you have them. You know, we like to look forward to these fail forwards and not recreate things that we know don't work in the past. So, you know, some of the things that we learned from example from the Dolan Creek subdivision where those roads were a little bit too narrow, and Councilor Bashand was had a lot of to do with these roads being wider, and I believe they're actually 33 feet wide in this phase. So we did accommodate some of those things.
Just on that point, I asked for 36.
I think we ended up settling with 33 though in the PUD.
Now, there's a reason for that. When you go up to Dolan Creek development, you can't get a fire truck or a snowplow through the streets.
And I think some of the other considerations again were, and I went back here a few weeks ago and reviewed all of that and some of the conversations back and forth, because there was several motions that were made, and I think the final one that passed was 33-foot roads with the designation of being a snow route, and the extra off-street parking per resident was where we ended up landing on that one.
The designation of snow route was the saving grace in this.
Correct.
So,
In other words, we've had a lot of discussions to get to this point.
And then Kyle is right. We added in, you know, when we first took a look at this, however many years ago, the thought was that we were going to be coming down from the other subdivision there, and then the traffic was going to be rerouted through this subdivision. So in essence, Alder Place would go away. That has now changed, and Alder Place is going to remain. So one of the things that, as we were reviewing the plans, you know, we looked at was we went back to the developers and said, hey, you know, there's no way that can be a gravel road. It's going to have to be a paved road if the intended purpose is to use that. So that is some of the reason for the cost. The same thing that Kyle was talking about, Orchard Place, which is the road that comes off of Avalanche and leads through the subdivision. They had proposed to leave that gravel until a future phase, and when we reviewed it, we went back and said, no, you know, the infrastructure committee met and said, we really want to see that as a paved through road. It gives secondary access. It does some other things as far as being able to loop water, provides for some sewer, some things like that. So, you know, through reviewing the development, the subdivision plans, what's actually going to get built, some of that spawned into, hey, we have to add this into the project plan, the agreement, some of these things to facilitate that.
And I would, not to keep digging up ancient history here, but there was a lot of discussion on, I'm gonna call it Orchard, which is the road to the campground that we added in here. That was, you know, through some of these discussions, it was in some of our original proposals to have that included. There was concerns about traffic and units backing up against it, and so it had gotten removed through conversation on the council. But as of recently, we've decided that it's good to add it in and complete the loop, and it makes certain things like snow removal easier. It creates some utility loops. It'll help create a more robust system, and overall, I've decided that it's better. So that's why it's in there. That's why it was removed in the first place. Is that you were there for those?
yes, thanks, Kyle.
So long answer. Did that answer your questions?
Yes.
Jim, thank you.
Say, Rick. You know, during some of the discussions, we talked about the county's discretionary formula and how that should not actually factor into commercial development on TIF districts.
Correct.
Because, I mean, essentially we're cutting our tax increment by doing that and lengthening out the amount of time. So has there been a waiver put in place for this?
There has been. We are in possession of a signed waiver of that discretionary formula from the developers.
I guess just to briefly cover that, I mean, the county offers, it's an incentive for commercial development that I believe it's 5 years, you get a tax break. Associated with this, Jim, I myself have had quite a few questions as well, and a lot of them were centered around the fact that you know, our total cost in 22 is $7.22 million, and total cost of 29 is, you know, 14.4. It's double the cost. I know we've seen increases, but I don't think we've seen that magnitude of increase. Can we kind of cover how some of that happened?
Sure. So it really is, we spent some time, talking about it, and it all boils down to the change in interest, and the development schedule that this thing gets built out at. So, it all boils down to, going from a 5% interest rate to a 9% interest rate. That's where this additional cost is coming from. Plus there's that, 800,000 for the orchard and Alder that were added, but the majority of that increase was for interest. And even under the 22 boundary, that 22 TIF, or the 22 interest rate, is left open. So it's not really a savings. And that was one of the key things in us bringing it forward that we wanted to be very clear on, is we were going to be very transparent and very open about what the real numbers were on this. We didn't write 22, and it's not in there. There's something like 3 million, but that was based on a 5%. When we came back, we said this is going to appear much higher because of this increase in interest rate, and we wanted that to be well known. And this is setting those maximum costs. The reality is we, as developers, have our own plans in place to accelerate development so that this thing pays off faster, because the sooner it pays off, we're off the hook, but then that's less interest overall that'll be saved. So once the TIF debt is expired, this TIF will expire. And that means, every bit that happens sooner, or every house that we put up quicker, means less interest dollars that go to the bank, and a quicker retirement of this TIF.
I'm not necessarily questioning every piece, but I just ran a quick loan calculation of $5 million against 5% and $5 million against 9%. And that's roughly $3 million difference. But we got an extra $4 million built in there somewhere. 800,000 for Alder Place. What does the rest add up to?
And what I would say to that is that it's not necessarily a straight line loan calculation. It's based off of, so obviously anytime that you have that loan put together, the TIF repayment is based on how fast we put homes up. So given that this is a large TIF, it's almost kind of an exponential difference between the two, because it pays off at a slower pace. And so at that 9%, we're having to pay off more interest internally, and so it compounds upon itself. That's where that interest is coming from. So it's not that the numbers have been changed to that effect, but it's basically the way that the pro forma reacts with time now. So let's say year one we had X amount of interest, that rolls over to year two, that 9% is additive, whereas 5% obviously is less of, and it takes a few years for the TIF to start paying back.
And just to add to that, if you actually look at the TIF documents, the base value of the TIF hasn't changed. So it's the different formulas calculating the total interest is the only thing. So our costs, that's all that goes towards infrastructure. If it pays off faster, it's less interest. If interest rates go down at reset periods, all those are saving.
And quicker payoff.
But does that make sense? If you look at TIF 22, that total was 4, with the city's portion and our portion of private funding was 4.125. You look at TIF 29, our portion again is 4.125. That's the basis. That's all we're getting. So the rest is all in the formulas of interest formulas, other than the addition of the 800,000 to improve Orchard and Alder.
I'll add to that real quick, in that every dollar that we're talking about, it's not us that certifies that. We have to show how those dollars came about. We provide that documentation to the city. The city certifies it as being correct. So when we talk about these things, all this stuff runs through the city at the end of the day. So these projects are bid out The dollars are accounted for. We build them, we show our financial, basically an audit of the project. That goes to the city, and then the city certifies it, and then that initiates the TIF process being paid forward. So none of this is just us being able to say this dollar amount, this dollar amount. It's all gonna be based off of state bid law, city certification, things being built to city standards, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. You know, obviously, to continue the conversation, I mean, most of the calls were definitely asking questions more on the negative side, so I'm just prefacing
No, we
the,
appreciate it. I mean, it's good that people understand, especially you that are making decisions about it, so.
it does look like there's a discrepancy, though, in the value between, you know, 28 million to like 54 million. Now, I haven't taken page for page on every exact piece, but I'm not sure how, I mean, because I'm seeing the documents showing us $5 million in TIF financing, not 4.1. I mean, that is right here on the document, the second piece. And,
Yeah, the 5 million includes the extra 800. I was talking the 4.1 to the 4.1, just in that.
you were going apples to apples still,
Yeah.
what you were doing in
I
the
wasn't
first
including the
project
additional.
plan
What
to the
was-
second
Yes,
project
what
plan.
we were agreed to in the project plan of one to the second one is the same.
Well, out of the calls received, there was a heavy, I mean, and obviously we've approved this first TIF, 22, happened in June of 22, I believe.
It was.
And, you know, with the expenses that we're at now, there was concern that, you know, there is not economic support for city budgets. I mean, we would see utility fees. Those are enterprise funds. Those are supposed to be kept separate. That's a separate business, if you will. Our general fund covers things like law enforcement, ambulance, police protection, fire protection, street maintenance, snow plowing, all those sorts of things. And the question was more involved of what is the take from the citizens in order to carry that now and tie that back to our budget constraints where, I mean, I read the letter that was put out by city, you know, the executive side of the city leadership here, that we're making some pretty drastic cuts. We're going to be. I mean, we're not going to know exactly what that is just yet, but it sounds like there's cuts coming. So how do you communicate, or how would you expect the council to communicate to the citizens and say, we can't do your chip seal on your street, we can't do your sidewalk project, we can't do capital improvement or replace pieces, when we need to make that investment against this other subdivision? And the people tie that back pretty heavily, and it involved the city council because we provided a letter of support for a $2.5 million state grant, not a loan, a grant. So there's lots of questions that have came out on how come that money does not show here somewhere. Can you help put that question to bed? Maybe that's more than one answer.
Yes, and I may call Rick up too to just verify some of this, but I would use a lot of what, you know, Bill had brought up with some of the building permit fees, right? There's going to be income that comes off of this. There's going to be contractors working. There's going to be a lot of economic boom from this project that the city will realize initially. Yes, it does take, you know, 20 years for that property tax piece to come back online, but there is money that is made and brought in up front. The city's investment, and this is where I would want Rick to verify that what I'm saying is true, in new subdivisions, in new infrastructure, in new buildings is relatively minor. So if you look at the maintenance calls to a new street, a new water main that was put in, new sanitary sewer, Your replacement cost for the initial, I mean, these things are put in for, 50-year lifespans, and the technology has gotten, it sounds silly, but, utility technology is more than it was 50 years ago. So if you compare where the city is spending money that's brought in on these projects, you'll see that the majority of it is in older neighborhoods where you have water mains that are failing, where you have older streets. Your investment in what the city's going to need to spend in a new subdivision is significantly less than other parts of town. That also is true with the emergency services. So you see less fire calls to new subdivisions. They're built with better materials, and you just see less of that than in older areas. A lot of times, and I've done a lot of different research on this as well, you look at police reports, new subdivisions and new homes have less police and emergency calls. It's just the reality of new homes and new infrastructure.
Kyle, you might move that microphone up just a little bit for the audience at home.
All right, there you go. Hopefully they didn't miss all that. But the investment that the city's going to have to be is relatively small in comparison to the initial dollars that the city will see from fees, the money that will be collected on the water and sewer portions and the monthly fees. So that's where a lot of this money from this project can be used throughout other projects. So I would say that very simply, this is a good project that helps to provide additional dollars for these projects that you're talking about. And the fact that now the entire project has moved to our balance sheet, and it's our, we're paying for the infrastructure. None of this money is coming from the city. None of this money is coming from the county. This money comes from us for the TIF. So none of that is being sourced from a different place. Whereas before, there's obviously an investment that was going to be made. As far as the grant goes, yes, the grant was, and it was contemplated initially with this project. A big part of the grant was the reason that we were awarded the grant was because the city was going to put in $1 million, and the state of South Dakota saw that as city involvement in this project. And it doesn't show up in the TIF documents, but it is being utilized for the infrastructure. That's straight into the whole overall pro forma.
And just to add to that too, I mean, where it does show up in the project plan and formulas is where we put the affordable housing piece in. If we didn't have the grants and TIFs, we can't produce a lot for $40,000 anymore. You can't find one. I mean, they'd be 60 to 80. You take all this stuff away and we just don't develop, because then we're at $100, $150, a linear foot for building this stuff out, and we're at 100 to 150,000 for a lot. And that, the community just won't support that. So in those formulas, we had to show where we offset lot costs, because that's the piece that we can control. We can't control materials, we can't control interest rates, but we can put it directly back at the lot and push that to the consumer and try to, build an affordable product. So, I mean, that's one piece to that. The other, I mean, not to lessen your question that there will be services, but right now, if we don't do a project out there, the ambulance is still going to Hidden Valley. Rick's still plowing Hidden Valley up the hill and probably to the landfill. So the fact that we just add that many more users to it and 2 streets, I mean, the main improvements we're doing is, Avalanche Road that's already being maintained, and just 2 side streets. So, and the garbage pickup, and like you said, that stuff will be self-sufficient because that goes, I would assume, to that budget.
Yeah, the enterprise fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course that's used to maintain those sewer lines and water lines that Kyle mentioned.
Yeah.
All right, I think that covers most of the questions that I was presented with. I mean, there was definitely concern of where the $2.5 million was factored in when the project cost doubled.
Sure.
It wasn't
Well, and we knew
out.
when we wrote that it was more transparent to have all those numbers on the TIF agreement. The previous one had it in a chart off to the side, and it just showed the 3 million, and it doesn't show all the compounding interest and all that with it. So in this one, you see what the number is. And that's the worst case scenario number. Anything above that, we're on the hook for. And it's our goal that, like I said, when these things reset, if interest rates go down, hopefully in 15 years, we're not even having this conversation and the thing's been a success and it's over. So,
And then after 15 years, or worst case scenario, 20 years, we've got $54 million in new infrastructure, new homes, new apartments built. That tax dollar goes straight to the city. Whereas right now, there's ag. We lowered the basis to ag classification, so there's not much taxes being collected.
Of course, there's not much services as well.
Right.
Say, Rick, as far as the county administrative fee for TIFs, has anybody reached out to the county? Do we know? I mean, do they just absorb that as part of the contract? Do we include that?
I have not, and I do know that, you know, effective, I believe July 1st of this year, there is some new law that was enacted that does give the county the ability to charge an administrative fee for you know, basically, they do a lot of the administrative work on the TIFs. Ours is kind of front-loaded on our end, reviewing it and doing all that. But once the TIF is in place, I mean, it really is the county that's collecting it and separating it and making the payments. And, you know, I guess we had this conversation earlier today. You know, all of those costs would come out of their pocket, basically. They're going to have to pay that, and they're aware of that. What we have written into the plan here shows the city's administrative, but I don't have an answer for you, Kevin. I don't know what that county administrative fee even is, and I think it's so new right now. I don't know, to be honest with you, if it's even been determined. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with what they passed, if it's a percentage or if it's a straight fee or what that is. But we did talk with them, and they're aware of it and know that they would have to cover that.
So, I would just say, we know that it exists now. If the number isn't known, we know that we'll have to pay that. The reason why you see the city's portion inside of the TIF is because that's TIF reimbursable, so the TIF will be paying that back to the city. In this case, it just comes as a hard cost to us.
All right, thank you. Just a comment, state law had the change on the county collecting some TIF administration funds, which there is a lot of work for them to track the increment and provide the tax apportionment, you know, for that increment in that amount. I mean, so it takes some time, you know, definitely not this agenda item, but based on the state law, we probably already own Avalanche Road because our city.
The county does also. That was one of the things, you know, and again, that's why we're trying to work with them. You know, if we abut the road on one side that city limits, by de facto, they can turn it over to the city. They don't, I mean, we don't have to accept it. They turn it over. On Avalanche Road, there are still some sections that are county on both sides, and then once we get up around the corner, then it resorts to county. And again, it makes more sense for me if I'm plowing or doing maintenance halfway up a road that has that kind of a grade on it. I'm going to go all the way to the top. It doesn't make any sense. Same thing with Alder Place. You know, I think there's 300 yards on the end of it that wouldn't qualify to be a city portion of the road. Again, we'll work out a deal with them where we take care of that, because it doesn't make any sense for them to come down there and take care of 300 yards of road when we're right there. So again, we're trying to work out a cooperative effort with them and come up with a plan to take over maintenance. It's not going to be the entire Avalanche Road all at one time. It's going to happen as some of this development occurs. And we've been talking about this for several years. We're far from having anything penciled out yet, But again, I think that spirit of cooperation and working with the county is what's important, and that I'm confident we can all come together and have an agreement that works for both the city and the county.
Because TIF 22 was approved and enacted, the county is already set up, and we're using the same boundary. The county's already set up the tax parcels and the mechanism, so they'll have to reset it, but a lot of that work is done. I'm not lessening that they're not gonna have a lot of work through the project, right? But the initial tax parcels have already been identified and created, and that's, so if you look at, you know, even the boundary, we've cleaned up that language, because now there are tax parcels associated with the boundary. So we put those right into that, so you can see what was already created for this TIF 22. And since this lays right on top of it, they can keep that same infrastructure in place when collecting those taxes.
And that was one of the requirements that the county imposed or gave us, was that that we could not change the boundaries of those parcel IDs, because they did already have them created. So the developers were good enough to ensure that happened, and I think, to be honest with you, now it's much cleaner and easier to tell what we're doing as far as the boundaries. And you'll see that, I guess, in the next action item, the maps of the actual boundary.
So for me, that would lead to one last question, and that's more of a procedure, because we can't have, TIFs can overlap, but they can't cookie cutter each other, right? So procedurally, if the council was gonna approve this, how do we create 29 without killing 22?
So my understanding is it's gonna be the way that the motion is made, and basically that the motion would be to approve TIF 29 contingent on the dissolvation of 22, or dissolving TIF 22. It's in the way
Contingent on
that
the
the
approval of.
Yeah, it's in the way that the motion is made to either approve or deny. I mean, if it denies, TIF 22 is still there. If it is approved, the language has to be made in that motion, so that they're basically, one is being dissolved and one is being created simultaneously.
Okay. Well, I lied, I had one more. Given the 2.5 million and all the changes, is there any way we can just change the dates and keep all the numbers the same from 22 to 29? $7 million total cost to the citizens of Sturgis?
What I would say is that inside of 22, the interest in that table is approximate. So the interest, if we keep 22 the way it is, the real number of interest is going to be what you see in 29, because that's not a max 3 million. That's a estimated amount based off of a unknown interest rate at that time. The actual interest rate in 22 is going to be the 9% or the 8.5%, or whatever we can get from the bank right now. And the real number in 22 is going to be what you see in 29. So there's not necessarily a way to do that, because we could do that, and the reality is that it's still going to be the same amount. Does that make sense?
It does a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this 29 is just meant to be fully transparent, setting maxes, where 22 set approximates to be verified as the loans and whatnot are negotiated. So you'll see the same interest calculations come through on 22 when it gets to be certified as you're going to see on 29. And those dollar amounts are going to be the same, minus that added cost of infrastructure of Alder and Orchard.
I think that answered it.
I guess it was brought up, I think Jesse mentioned it, with some of the language from TIF 22 with the recreational facilities, including parks, walking trails, and trailhead parking. So that was omitted in this TIF 29. Would you guys be willing to put that language back into this TIF 29 as well? I know you said you still have plans to do it, but seeing the language actually in here, because it was in 22.
Yeah, I guess if, now I know that time is important, so if that would be something that the city wants to see that note added back in there, absolutely, I would recommend that the recommendation be that this be approved with the addition of that language. The details are, you know, in what we're actually spending this money on are in Rick's court with what he's approving on those plans, so they're already a part of the project moving forward. So I think even in the next, you'll see that there's preliminary plan set in there that's very close to being approved right now. It shows the infrastructure that we're talking about. So it's in there, but if it sounds better, I guess, to put it simply, then absolutely put the language back in there. It's
The hard part is the way our design is, that I don't know what benefit, I mean, and I don't care really whether it's in there or not, because even in the first project plan, though it was in there, in the project plan, the park is not completed because it's part of this phase and is accessed off this street going forward. And trailheads, you know, again, I think that language was pulled from another TIF that had a trailhead. Not saying we might not at some point, but, you know, we're looking at 20 acres of 150 acre future development that it's hard to know exactly where and how everything will go.
Yeah, I would say if we want that language added back in, I would remove the trailhead piece, because the trailhead was meant for access to national forest ground and other larger interconnected pieces, where this is private surrounding us, so.
Sure. Well, just to keep the two of them the same, since everything else is the same, I think, well, I don't know if it's just me or if council would be more comfortable with all that language being the same in 22 and 29, other than the trailheads, obviously, if that's not.
Yeah, that's not an issue. It doesn't change the dollar amounts, and it doesn't change what we're building.
Sure.
But it does add that little bit of extra to make sure that we do build the bike paths and whatnot.
I think we kind of went into all of these, the contract and then the project plan. So
I wanted to add just one other thing that I was asked over the last week, and that had to do with creating lots using TIFs, and somebody thought that we controlled all the lots, whether or not we would let people build, sell them to the public, whatever. So we have found that in our projects that we kind of do a balance of both, but we can't just sell lots to let people sit on. Our last project, for example, most of you are aware of Davenport. I mean, in the first two phases, we don't own a lot anymore. And we sold probably a third of those to individuals who were going to build at a certain time frame, but haven't. We kept as many as we did to make sure that the building got done, because what we need is rooftops. I mean, that's ultimately what we want. So just for public record, if somebody wants a lot and wants to build a house, we are all for it. You can bring your own contractor, do whatever, but we need to make sure we're on schedule and that we make sure that they're getting done and that people aren't buying these lots, especially like out there where we have an affordable piece. We don't want to discount the lots to try and get a first-time home buyer into a house, and then somebody else buys that lot as an investment and, you know, doubles their money in 5 years because they just sat on it. So we try to control those things. We don't limit who can build. You know, we do have light covenants for what they can build, but we want is building. We want the economic stimulant. We want the TIF to be successful. We want to, you know, provide for the housing needs and all that. So just to clarify that.
Thank you. So, any other questions on 12.2 or 12.3? We went into
Mayor,
both of those.
I don't know if they are here to speak, but I see we have a couple of school representatives here. And I don't want to put them on the spot, but I would be just curious, knowing TIF 22 is in place already, how the school views this.
Well, we're Wayne Wormstead, Superintendent of Meade School District.
And I'm Brett Burdett, the business manager for the Meade School District.
Just to start with, we're not opposed to any TIF, as this is, we actually heard some answers here that we didn't have from this. We actually received a letter for a hearing that we thought was tomorrow, then we found out this is tonight. Didn't see it on the hearing schedule, so we're just not quite sure if we're supposed to speak or not, correct, Brett?
Well, yeah. Everybody knows one of the things we're here is the same thing you guys are. We're looking for to gauge economic development in the community, how to serve that growth. And one of our challenges is obviously as we try to build facilities and provide facilities for public education, and to do that through tax dollars, we try to forecast what those revenue streams are going to be and when they become available, and how we market that too. Is so if we got to take on debt, it's how we market to the taxpayer what that debt's going to be, how it affects their tax bills and stuff like that. So one of the things we're always looking at is how long will those tax dollars be kind of obligated or leaned in those TIFs. And that's kind of what we're here tonight for, is to look at terms of TIFs to make sure that if they're done early, that they're exhausted, so those dollars put back in circulation so they can be utilized by the tax entities such as the school district. So really more of an educational part, but
Yeah, and we have three areas, we have general fund, special education, and capital outlay. The state makes this whole basically on general fund and special education. Where the issue comes in as capital outlay for us is, as this will provide students to the school, which is great with that piece there, but it also requires us to have a great capital cost from additions to books to everything else that comes out of our capital outlay budget. But yet that tax impact is not hit for us at that time for us to collect that revenue through the entire TIF. As you said, with 12 TIFs on the books right now, those 12 TIFs limit that pool of resources that we have at this time for that. So if we need to add on to the high school and we have to take bonds out for that, that TIF doesn't generate any bond income for that, for the capital outlay piece of that. So that means that bondable area is eating up more of our capital outlay funds across that because we have less revenue for that. So I'm here to encourage you to have the shortest amount of time on any TIFs. Don't have max limits on them. Okay, be very targeted in the funds that you have. We're not trying to oppose any TIF, but moving forward, that really helps you as a city government, helps us as a school district, helps the county also, to help all of our taxpayers as we have economic development, get the resources put back into our facilities and other needs that we have within our community. So I think that's.
yeah, just, tough decisions,
Yep.
Great tools to use. Again, we're just looking for good leadership by those TIF entities and understanding how we're scrapping for those same tax dollars as everybody else is, and getting them on the table as quickly as we can.
Yep. And we're not opposing this again. I just want to make sure you know that. We're just looking towards the future as we see 12 TIFs or more on the books. And past this one, what's the future plans of the city?
So I think we all understand that the legislature is going to do something to property taxes. We understand that, and they're going to target owner occupied. And so, we know that they're going to do something to regulate how much money we can generate through that capital outlay fund. They did it in 2017, and they're going to be attempt to do it again. Ag was addressed, owner occupied is going to be addressed, and that's a big concern of ours, is how do we forecast and try to predict what that tax stream is going to be, and how long out is it going to be before we're able to realize some of that revenue. So
Yeah, we're obviously heavy on TIFs. 22 exists.
Mm-hmm.
If this was a new TIF, I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Yeah.
I'm questioning how this affects you, how 29 affects you different than 22,
Well,
or what the impact.
We work closely with some folks in Pierre, and obviously we're held whole. We still get the money. If we request $6 million, we get $6 million. We just don't necessarily get to spread that out over more rooftops. And so the quicker those rooftops are brought back in, then it allows us to, again, market that debt. We're heavily debt at the school. And so in order to do the things we need to do, we extended ourselves out there, and so cash flow is very important to us to service that debt. And as we look at this, and we say another 20 years, we start to look at, how hard is it going for us to convince our board to increase those mill levies, to increase that tax amount coming in, to take care of the same inflationary costs that the gentleman at the table were here right before us talking about. We all understand that we're being pinched by that same inflation, and how do we deal with that?
Thank you.
Thank you for the time, Jesse.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for describing the where it's made whole and where it isn't. That capital outlay is definitely leaves a hole in your long-term program.
So, are there any, or is there any further discussion on 12.2 and 12.3, the contract agreement and the project plan, since we kind of lumped them all together? I don't know if anyone from the public had any questions that weren't answered. You got one?
Not so much a question, but a point to be made. And there is a lot of scrutiny out there for anything we do that costs a buck as a city. And I think it's important to make it clear that this is a whole new council. And this project was started way before most of you were behind the table. And so the learning curve, the catch up, the understanding of the big picture, the shift from 22 to 29, that's a tough go. And I think that your constituents need to understand that this is in progress. It's not cancelable, it's in progress. And your judgment will be used to make the best decisions about carrying it out. And just on your behalf, I just want people to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Is this 9-1 as well?
No, we'll go, since this discussion has mostly been on 12.2 and 12.3, I'll keep it there, and we can...
Isn't 9-1 related?
Yep, I was going to take motions on these two first, or,
That's
I
all
mean,
right.
we can open it up. I'm okay with opening it up for discussion on the boundaries if you want to now, and then we can just
Yeah.
run down.
No, that's whatever you've got in plan.
Can I ask one more thing?
Sure.
We say we have 22 TIFs, and this is 22, but this is turning into 29. What is 23, 4, 5?
We
What-
have more than 22.
What are the numbers in between? Do we have TIFs out there for all the numbers between 22 and 29?
Yeah, so we have, is it 12 open ones, Rick? Yeah, so there were ones opened after 22 then that are those other numbers.
But some at the bottom of the barrel, starting with 1 and up, have
Are already done, yep,
finished. Okay.
yes.
Well, that question keeps coming up. How many TIFs do we have out there?
Oh,
So,
okay.
thank you.
Well then, why don't we just go ahead and move into discussion on the, well, it doesn't have a number. So 9.1, what we moved, and that is the boundaries, and nothing should have changed with the boundaries, if I'm correct. I don't believe there was a map, an actual map in the agenda packet. If anyone wants to see it. I have a couple printouts. Does anyone want to see the boundaries? They haven't changed, so. Are there any questions or discussion on the boundaries? Kyle, did you have a comment on the boundaries, or? Okay. Is this, I believe this is what planning and zoning, planning and permitting had?
There is a boundary map, and that's not correct. It's close, but it's not correct.
Oh. Is it this?
Just so you're looking at the right thing.
No.
Okay, this is what they just printed for me from planning and permitting.
that stuff to the west.
So these
Looks like a-
maps were more conceptual. These are taken
Okay.
straight from 22 with 29 put at the top. So the boundary is a little bit different, only because this doesn't show what the actual boundary was for 22 or 29. So Rick's got that.
So this was taken from 22, but it's not the actual boundaries? You're saying? Oh, gotcha. Okay.
This was
It's-
based off of the PUD, so like the zoning was only for a portion.
Gotcha. Okay, we're looking to see if we can find a map to make it easier for people.
The layout is different, but the boundaries are the same. Is that,
And the county already has those boundaries on file. So really, nothing's changing. All right. Well, then, are there any questions on the boundaries? Oh, okay.
Just so you guys can see what actually is being done.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Big change.
So, and not to belabor this point, but to answer your question, can I come grab one of those sheets?
Yeah.
Maybe, can I just?
Like one of
put it up
these?
Here, is that gonna be fair?
Sure.
The boundary.
Is that working?
Just so you can see the difference where it goes like this.
Need a ballpoint? Okay.
This part of it is included in the TIF. That's what you see the extra in there.
Okay, gotcha.
That map was created from the parcel ID that the county has.
Okay. So this map on the screen is what the county has that's the approved boundaries. Does anyone want to look at what he drew? He added this section. All right. Does anyone from the public have any questions on the boundaries? All right, a lot of information. A lot didn't change other than interest rates and the city not being on the hook for that $1 million. So the developer will be getting their own financing. So that'll bring us back to 12.2, which is the contract agreement. Is there a motion on that contract agreement?
And do I understand that the motion will include stopping 22 and accepting 29?
And I guess, Rick, maybe you can clarify this. Which one would need to dissolve both of these, 12.2 and 12.3? Would the language to dissolve TIF 22 have to be both in the motion for the contract agreement and the project plan, or just in the motion for the, or in both?
I forgot my lawyer hat. I would,
maybe.
I would say as long as the motion is to approve one contingent on the other one being dissolved, I would make that motion in all
So
of.
for all of them?
So that we cover,
Okay.
I mean, we're covered.
Okay.
And
Well, then I would make the motion that we approve 29 contingent on 22 being dissolved.
Okay, so that is a first by Jim to approve that contract agreement for TIF 29, contingent on TIF 22 being dissolved.
Is this where we want to add the language about the parks and
Project
sidewalk?
plan.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, so that is a first by Jim and a second by Mike. Any further discussion on the contract agreement from the public? Okay. All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Those opposed with a no. Okay, that contract agreement passes. On to 12.3, which is the TIF 29 project plan. Is there a motion on that?
I'd make that motion. this
Same
required?
language with dissolving
Whatever
and
is the best language that approves what we wish.
and with that
This is the one where you would add the language of the parks
of
back
the
into.
parks, right? Did you want to add?
Yes,
And
I would
it's
love-
your
I would-
motion,
I would
so.
love to have that.
Okay. All right, so that is a first by Jim to approve TIF 29 project plan contingent on dissolving TIF 22 and adding the language of the parks, the
Parks.
bike paths and the parks.
I'll second.
And a second by Ruth. Any further discussion from the public? All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Those opposed with a no. And that passes. And then that brings us down to the TIF 29 boundaries. Is there a motion?
I would make the motion to approve the boundaries as outlined.
And
Second.
should we add that language too of the dissolving the 22?
Is that required?
would.
Whatever makes that work best.
Okay. So,
22 will be dissolved.
okay. So that is a first by Jim to approve the boundaries for TIF 29 contingent on dissolving TIF 22 boundaries.
Done.
And did I hear a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay, and that is a second by Dawn. Any further discussion from the public? All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no. Okay, and that passes unanimously also. That'll bring us down to the next item on the agenda. And this is consideration to approve Resolution 2024-48, which is a resolution authorizing the countersigning of contracts, agreements, and plats. And as Kevin mentioned earlier in a comment in the non-agenda matters about the finance officer having duties, statutory duties, and part of that is signing things. So without a finance officer, we have plats and other documents that will not be able to be signed. So this resolution gives the authority to sign as finance officer different department heads as noted in the staff report. Are there any questions about that?
I think it's more of a comment, Mayor, that, I mean, this covers one portion, the signing of plats, but does not cover many of the duties outlined by statute for the finance officer. And personally, I think we would be better served by appointing a interim finance officer to cover that.
And we may have to look at that for for other matters, for sure. Right now, we've run into we have no one to sign these documents. So, and that's why this resolution came up, because we've had plats already present themselves and no one to sign them. So this is to quickly be able to sign any of our contracts, agreements, plats, and whatnot. And yes, we might have to look into.
Would it be reasonable to table this till item 14? So we have a chance to talk about it, because it might include personnel discussion. I mean, it seems
To
like
talk about it in I mean, we would have to, definitely just have to keep it to the personnel, if it's to be talked about in exec. If you think, if tabling it till after exec, it's just strictly due to personnel matters, then.
agreed. As long as it's personnel, we can talk about it. I mean, I guess there might not be support, but I would make the motion that we table it until later in the agenda, after item 14.2.
I'm sorry, thank you for that motion. Did you have a comment on this item?
Just noting that a lot of our contracts have the finance officer as the signer, so probably should have somebody interim appointed, because I don't think that allows us to allow like the planning director to sign that contract, and otherwise we'd have to amend the contract, and then that takes.
Well, this resolution would, so it's a resolution, so it would just be something temporary, and
Yes,
it gives
yes.
them, that ability to as finance officer. So, yes,
Okay.
thank you.
You have time,
All right.
Bill?
Okay, so that was, Kevin, you made a motion to
I guess there was a motion, but no
table.
second.
Well, that's because I interrupted, so I don't know if there would be a second.
I would second.
Okay, so that was a first by Kevin and a second by Jim to table item 12.4 until then after exec, so maybe item 14.3.
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no. Okay, that item is tabled until after exec. Then that brings us down to item 12.5. And this is confirmation of stipends for staff to cover temporary duties and responsibilities. With the departure of our finance officer and soon to be departed Director of Administrative Services and HR, there have been some staff that have been assigned extra duties. They have been moved around and have been taking on a lot. So everyone on council was given a list of those people who are taking on more duties and a proposed stipend for them, as well as continuing the stipend for the chief administrative staff. Are there any questions? So this ultimately is like a payroll change.
I thought this ended at the end of August.
That what ended the end of August?
Or was September?
September 3rd was the stipend for the chief administrative staff, and so we were to revisit it at this meeting. So
that's
this
purpose.
Yes, and so this would continue their stipend, as well as giving chief and the director of public works, Rick, they would be splitting some of the stipend that Lisa was receiving, since they'll be taking on extra duties as well.
It's difficult to ask that question. But can we consider about the people? Because it doesn't have anything to do with the people as much as it does the money. And it appears that the city shouldn't, I mean, it's hard to imagine continuing to spend money when we don't have any. So I would say I feel like the stipend, that's nice, but we've got to stop sometime. We don't have a city administrator yet. And
So we are still saving money because we're losing people. So this stipend doesn't even cover Lisa's salary. And then we have no finance officer right now. So all it is Lisa's stipend being split between them. And so we're saving currently on that salary and the finance officer's salary as well. So we are still saving money.
I'm just thinking about the money, and I think when we knew that we were going to be short, we should have started a long time ago, like in April or May, and now it's September. And I think we need to look at not spending money rather than finding ways to do more. And that doesn't have anything to do with individuals. I just think that we as a council need to be aware that the citizens of Sturgis have heard that we're in trouble financially, and yet we continue to spend money. And stipends are nice. Giving raises or bonuses or Christmas gifts is always nice. But when you don't have the money to do it, I don't see why we continue to do that. Just for discussion.
Sure.
I think, Jim, I personally, I wouldn't look at it so much as I guess you can call it whatever. You can call it a stipend, a bonus, whatever, but being compensated for doing the work of what the finance officer should be doing, the other department heads, whoever takes on that responsibility.
But that's not what we're talking about, is it?
It's pretty much a payroll change, yes, because they're all taking on extra duties. So it's as if they have a different position. They're all doing extra work. They're doing the work of a finance officer. They're doing the work of the HR director and director of administrative services. So all the people that are taking on those extra duties would have a payroll change until we fill those positions. So we're not spending any more money. We're actually still saving money.
And I understand the city, where we're at with our finances, but these people have piggybacked a lot of extra work and hours in their schedule. So to me, I think it's money well spent to keep them on the payroll instead of possibly leaving and going somewhere else. Because sooner or later, if you don't give them a bonus or whatever we want to call it, the grass is greener on the other side possibly. So
I certainly understand that, Tony. I'm just thinking, if this was my business and I was being called on by the bank and by people that I owed money to, and I wouldn't be giving out bonuses. I'd probably be. You're glad I understand.
I understand too.
I think
but
we
what
need
I'm
to have
saying,
a thought here. I understand. Yes, what you're saying is
we're not spending. We've down 3 people, and we're using a partial salary of one of them people to pay this extra. Is how I guess I look at it.
So we're not. But I thought we were just still talking about when Daniel left. There was 7 people that got a stipend. Now there's 3, but now you're talking about with Lisa and Adam and whoever else is gone.
They're all going to be splitting only Lisa's stipend from that city manager stipend that they were receiving. So, it's not even cutting into the salary of Lisa's salary or the finance officer's salary.
So what department is means of finance for this? We've paid the stipend out of city manager, but on this proposal that you have, there are 6 hourly employees. It's not a substantial amount, but that also would not come out of a city manager budget.
Right.
That would be finance office.
And Lisa,
or
you might have to
HR?
answer this payroll question as far as where it's actually.
So, for example, we could take, right now the stipends are coming out of the city administrator budget, but the ones that deal with the HR can come out of the HR budget. The ones that deal with just the finance office can come out of the finance. And then Jody and Rick's would continue to still come out of that city administrator.
That seems reasonable to
For
me.
basically what the assigned duties are.
Lisa, could you say that again a little slower? That was not easy to understand.
So we have 3 different departments. We have the city administrator, human resources, and finance office these duties are coming out of. We would just pay the duties that they're being assigned out of the relevant department. So if it's an HR duty, it would come out of the HR budget.
Not as Angela just said, you're not taking your stipend and spreading it out. You're taking it
We
out of
are,
those
but we're just allocating it financially against different departments.
Okay.
And it's just slightly more than the stipend that I had.
So in a motion, it would be similar to our annual wage resolution, so we'll name the people, correct?
Yes.
I would motion to add the additional stipend monies to Jody Vandewater and Rick Bush in the amount of $263 above where they were, and that the 6 hourly employees and Bertolotto for sales tax, $1 per hour, Jen Bush for employee benefits, work comp items for HR, $1.25, Joy Sealers, cemetery records and general finance office help, $1, Amy Hart, agenda packets, council minutes, property and liability claims, $2, Robin Korth, cash receipting, utility payments, $1.25, and Joanne Smith, bank reconciliation and general ledger. Those are big ones. $1.25, and those are hourly adjustments.
I'd second that.
Okay, that was a first by Kevin and a second by Tony to approve those additional wages for the extra duties. Are there any further questions or discussion?
And Jody and Rick's is per pay period.
Yes, theirs is the 263 per pay period. Theirs will change. And the other staff will be hourly. Yes, Bonnie.
I just wanted to say, Kevin, I thank you for the way you worded that motion and putting all those details in there. But I do have to ask, when it was stated clearly that that information would be included in the council minutes, why there was no visual of that proposal distributed to the rest of us? It should have been.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Those opposed with a no.
No. At what point are we gonna start filling positions? And at what point are we gonna quit losing positions? This is 9 people we've lost. 9 positions. The city of Sturgis cannot operate much more. This has been gone on long enough.
So that was 6 yeses and 2 nos to continue the stipends for staff to cover duties temporarily.
And if I could, I'd give everybody a 50% raise that's doing their jobs.
All right, and that brings us down to our next item, which would be executive session. So there is anticipated action after executive session.
Dan?
I know you had tabled mine. I just wanted to apologize, and I'll be at the next meeting for your next one.
Thank you.
But it's my wife's birthday. We were at dinner,
Oh.
and your meetings usually last 2 or 3 hours prior, so I thought I'd be safe.
We're being efficient today.
So I'll be at the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks for staying.
Your wife's got a good birthday.
Yeah, is it yours?
It's Kevin's birthday, yeah.
Happy birthday.
Okay, is there a motion for exec?
I motion.
That was a first by Tony
I'll second.
and a second by Ruth. All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Those opposed with a no? Okay, we will start exec at 9:05.
Hey, Tony? Turn that front light down. Thank you. Just kills me.
We're not on intermission yet.
My eyes are doing pretty good.
I'm not sure why her permissions aren't working. Hold on, Jim. Sorry, I just don't wanna. End the broadcast, because for whatever reason it didn't link up right on this one, so we'll have to end it and bring it back.